Hello, everyone.
Hello.
All right. My name is Jay Schmelzer. I'm one of the directors of program management on the developer tools team, the developer division at Microsoft. Just to give you a little context of myself, I'm currently have the opportunity to lead the team that's responsible for .NET, the runtime, the framework, the tooling around that, from the compilers into the editing and debugging experience, as well as the tools in Visual Studio for cloud application development and deployment. What we're going to try to do, well, let me just stop there and allow my co-presenter to introduce herself.
My name's Beth Massey, and I work for that guy.
I don't know why they're laughing.
If you ever worked for you, you'd know.
Got it. So what Beth and I want to do today is take our 75 minutes and just try to give you an overview of kind of what's new and what's current in the Microsoft application development stack, and kind of the whole breadth of what we do. If you were in the session just before this, Brian Harry talked a lot about what we're doing in the DevOps and application lifecycle space. So he did okay, you've built your app, and now let's go do other interesting things with it and start getting it out. Beth and I will come back at the beginning of that, basically, and do the construction aspect. Now, just so we set expectations, this is an overview. So what we're trying to do, our goal here is to just introduce you to all the things that have been going on. I'll spend a little time up front and talk to you a little bit about why we're doing it, talk about some trends we've been seeing, and then kind of give you some context so you can go figure out what sessions you want to go to throughout the rest of the week here at Ignite. And we'll try to do our best to point out as we're doing things, names of sessions or days of sessions or speaker names that we know are talking about these things, to give you a bit more of a guide. So, one other ground rule before I get started. If you see something that you think is cool, we talk about something you think is cool or interesting, neither Beth or I get offended if you clap. That's totally cool with us. If you see yeah, perfect. If you see something you don't like, we'll be around the rest of the week, and you can come up and chat with us
later.
One-on-one. So with that, let's start with just a little quick context. One of the things we had the opportunity to do as part of the program management team is really go out and engage a lot with customers, with developers. And one of the things that we get to bring back from that, and we try to do, is identify a set of themes, both from the developers we talk to, but as well as the businesses they work for. And then kind of those feed into the way we think about building the product. So the first thing, I think Satya actually talked about it a little bit this morning in his keynote. If you watched Build or were at Build last week, we talked about it a lot in those keynotes, where really there's never been a more exciting time to be an application developer. Right? Our role inside of the organization is just increasingly important. Every business is evolving. Software is a core part of that, and we need to be able to go and meet those needs, which puts some demands on us, but it also makes us incredibly valuable to the overall organization. That whole idea that every company is becoming a software company, right? And there's a few examples up here of companies that have really gone and completely changed the world in specific verticals, whether it be the way we think about acquiring movies, the way we acquire, get rides to and from events and venues, or even just something as basic as phone calls. I have to admit, one of the first projects, one of the first things I ever did coming out of school, one of the first companies I worked for, I had a client that was a payphone company. Remember those days when you had payphones? Right? Remember when you walked off an airplane and everybody went running for the payphone bank? Now try and find a payphone bank, right? They're just not there, right? The cellular, the mobile world, and then, the voice over IP world has really just completely changed the way we think about communicating with people. And all that is because of software, right? The software that we as developers create and write. When I think about that and bring it a little bit more concretely to what kinds of things are we writing, the software industry has a few ways of describing the types of applications we build. For many years, we were focused on building what everybody refers to as the system of record, right? The back-end system that was storing the data, that was doing all the transaction processing. It was usually only accessed by employees of the company, right? We had direct access to it. These things were mission critical, extremely important. We didn't go and reinvent them very often, but we worked on them all the time. So the idea that we made investments there that were going to stand the test of time for 20, 25, 30 years. More recently, we've seen a lot more of the mobile workforce and the need to go and create applications that span the different form factors that people have, are mobile in terms of their ability to move across the different devices that we work with. These also started to get more customer and client facing. We suddenly had people directly interacting with our organization through software, right, and through these devices. The one that we've been seeing a lot recently is kind of fitting in between there, where we're looking at what we call systems of engagement, or apps that go and bring a lot of the data that we have in those back-end systems of record and make them more available to both employees of the organization that are out engaging with customers, but increasingly even with customers themselves. So they don't have direct access to the back-end, but they do have a projected access to what's sitting in that back-end store. And in a lot of cases, there are even transactional things that are happening. These put all kinds of interesting strains or new pressures on us as application developers, because we're thinking about how do we go and ensure that a back-end system that was designed originally to deal with thousands, tens of thousands of people accessing it potentially concurrently, to potentially millions of people now accessing it as our apps become more engaging and they become more popular. So those are the kinds of things that we've been thinking about a lot. It's a lot of what goes into the priorities that we have in this next sort of wave of developer technology coming kind of from Microsoft, both in the terms of our tools and our frameworks and our runtimes. So with that, thought what we do is spend a minute and take a quick look at kind of an example of one of these kind of more modern applications that we'll use as a theme and kind of come back to it throughout the session. So with that, let's change to 3, right?
Yep. All right, let's see what we got here. So, let's take a look at some of these apps we got here. So we're going to dive more deeper into how we built these apps, but I just kind of wanted to give like an overview of how they work. Now, let's take a look at the Android and the iPhone next to each other first. These two apps are actually using the same view models, the same data services, the same back-end services. It's just differentiated a little bit because of how each of the platforms are a little bit different. Okay, so you'll see the buttons a little bit different down here for an iPhone, and here in this case, the Android the list is big, so it doesn't need to scroll. If you look at the Windows Phone, this is Jay's cute little 920. It's red. It's so cute, isn't it? It's a little smaller. So we scroll a little bit more, but you'll see that it takes advantage of the swipe, just like we are used to with Windows phones. So this scenario, the company, My Shuttle Biz, is an Uber-like company. There's 2 apps. This is the customer app you're looking at. So as a customer, we are providing apps for our customers no matter what type of devices that they're on, and these are native apps. We also have a driver application. So the drivers themselves get notified by customers. And this application is actually built using Apache Cordova, which we'll jump into a little bit later, basically providing a more web-like development and that can span multiple devices, one code base. Okay, so the idea here is that I'm going to go ahead and request, maybe this Pontiac is near me. Yeah, it looks pretty close. I'm at McCormick. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be Jay. I'm the customer. This is Jay's phone. And I'm going to go ahead and just send this request. So there we go. And hopefully we'll get some message pop up here. I'm the driver, actually.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start. Okay, so I picked you up. Hey, Jay, where do you want to go?
We got to go to Wrigley.
Wrigley Field. All right. All right, I'm done.
That's about right.
That's about right. If you ever got into the car with me, you would know. That makes a lot of sense. All right, Jay, I would like to need your signature. Would like to have your signature here. Can you please? That's be $1,000. Thank you. And there we go. All right, so now I can go back to my phone, or Jay's phone, okay, if you wish. And you'll see that I have my rides, and now we can see that he could go in and rate me like as a 5 or whatever, and I'm awesome. All right, there's also some back-end pieces like desktop apps and web app for the customer-facing site that we're going to dive into as we kind of go through this. But I'm going to let Jay take over and talk to us about something like what these things are doing.
Oops, not 1. PowerPoint. 5. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
You would think 1, 2, yeah.
No.
We don't. They want to make us really work for it up here. So that's just the mobile apps. If you were in Brian's session, you saw him point to some of the back-end apps behind this. We'll look at a little bit of all of that throughout the course of our time today. So let's talk a little bit about kind of the mobile experiences. This morning in the keynote, Satya kind of helped people get a little bit better understanding of when we talk about mobile, we're not just talking about phones and the form factor. We're talking about mobility of an experience across a set of devices. For developers, what we needed to do, and we knew we needed to do, was go help you as a developer take the skill sets that you have today and the kinds of applications you've been building today and extend that out into a more mobile customer experience, an experience that can go be mobile across these different devices. So today, if you think about Visual Studio back, a couple years ago, we don't think about it this way anymore, but some people do a couple years ago, we really had two different areas that we focused on. Really rich experiences that were building desktop-style applications on Windows, and broad reach experiences that were really typically done through web technologies to reach the breadth of a set of devices. So in this, in Visual Studio 2015, what we wanted to do was go and ensure that regardless of where you were coming from a technology and skill set standpoint, and regardless of what the needs you had for the types of applications you were building, we could let you build on those skills to go meet the growing needs and demands of your solution or your customer base. So in the case of people coming from rich experiences, right, we have a set of things where we continue to invest in building those rich experiences on Windows, whether that is Windows Desktop with technologies like WPF, or Windows devices through the new Universal Windows Platform or Windows Universal Platform that allows you to build and target the desktop form factor, the tablet form factor, the device form factor, the big screen form factor. And then when you need to extend that beyond the Windows family into a set of devices running other operating systems, we've partnered with Xamarin to allow you to take those C# and .NET skills and apply them to building native iOS and Android applications. For web developers, typically you were targeting a broad set of devices and a breadth set of experiences already. So using HTML and JavaScript, maybe some back-end server technologies like ASP.NET and so forth, increasingly getting more and more into a rich experience with JavaScript on the client. To allow you to, so you already had the breadth available to you. To go and target a rich set of experiences that are more native to an actual mobile device platform, we've incorporated and been doing a lot of work with the Apache Cordova project to allow you to use HTML and JavaScript to target these more native experiences on Windows, iOS, and Android. And we'll go into a lot more detail about that in a few minutes. But so let's talk a little bit and take a look with some demos and some more conversation about what we mean by the investments we're making in this kind of mobility kind of space. So the first thing we'll do is let's take a look at WPF and some investments we're making there.
All right. All right, folks. So this is an application. Once it comes up, here we go. Oh, let me log in because that's going to be an issue. All right, so let me get Visual Studio open here. All right, so I've got a desktop app. This is a WPF app. Let's just go ahead and run it. This is used by our back office to take a look at kind of a dashboard of all the cars, the drivers, what's happening, kind of as just this 10,000-foot view. There's a lot of things inside, especially with the WPF tooling and diagnostics that I want to show you in Visual Studio 2015. So let's take a look at how we can kind of debug some of these things. I don't know, the network might be a little bit faster today, so it's not as slow. But you notice as I click on a car, that's my car, the Chrysler 300, by the way, the driver loads a little bit slowly. Maybe we should try and see if we can diagnose that a little bit. Also, I might want to just make some changes to the app, really quickly while it's running. And, maybe we need to do some more deeper debugging. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to move this kind of over to the side a little bit. We're still in debug mode here. All right. And you'll notice we have this new live visual tree window. Okay, so what I can do here is I can actually go and inspect elements of my UI. And you'll notice that it synchronizes right here. We've got a small window here. Let me move that out of the way. All right, it synchronizes right here. And actually what I could do is there's a live property editor as well. So maybe I want the font size instead of be 12, I can make it be like 45. All right. And there well, that's a little too big, but as you'll notice, we get the live updating of that. Okay, it's pretty cool. Yeah, you guys like that? Sweet, sweet. All right. So that's not really diagnostics. That's more like design. But let's do this thing again. So we're literally, let me uncheck that off. We're literally going to try and figure out if this, loading is a little bit slow or how fast it's taking. This happens a lot. So go back over here. So Solution Explorer. And I'm going to open up our main view model because I know that that's where we're loading the cars. Okay. So I got down here. I want to see how long it takes me to call this method. This is the web service, okay, to get this stuff. All right, how many times do we write like debugger time, set the time, how to subtract the time? I need to figure out how long this thing is. Yeah, everybody's nodding. Oh God, yes, I do that all the time. All right, I'm just going to refresh our list here, and we'll get that hit, and then I'll just go ahead and continue, and you'll notice it says 465 milliseconds have elapsed. All right, so now it's just a perf tip, we call them, all right? So this, no more do you have to write any kind of code like that inside of your application. Visual Studio will automatically do it for you. Pretty cool, huh? All right, but it gets better, all right? It gets better. For instance, I'm sitting here in debug. Maybe I'm like, well, let's see, what are the results? We could always kind of like do this in the interactive window. All right, so we got the results, but all right, I know that there's 19 of them, but it's some giant object. Maybe I want to filter this, I want to create a lambda. All right, so let's do this, actually. All right, so we got results, and what I want to do is actually do a where clause, and I actually want to have it work. All right, has everybody ever tried this? Let's do where the rating average, we'll just do the rating average is greater than or equal to 3. How about that? Okay. And maybe I want to see a little bit more information about this object. So we're going to select a new anonymous type. And so I'll see the rating, and let's also see maybe the driver ID. All right, I better be rated pretty well. There it goes, folks. We got Lambda debugging working in Visual Studio 2015. It also works in the watch window as well, okay? So we can drill into our objects, that sort of thing. But it gets even better than that. You're like, Beth, how could it get any better than that? No, it's cray-cray. All right, so let's just do this. Yeah. Oh, you are not going to be like that, are you? It does get better than this. I mean it. Hold on. I'm going to do it one more time, just so the demo gods are always on my back. There we go. All right. See, I am now editing and continuing. And there we go. Okay? Edit and continue also works with Lambda debugging as well. All right? Awesome. Yeah, you're up.
Yeah,
2?
Yeah, that sounds right. Can't believe it. I was on stage when someone said cray-cray in a technical conversation.
Sorry. At least I didn't say the real phrase.
No. 5. Yeah. Okay, so that's a little bit of, well, it's a little bit of some things we're doing in WPF. The real way to think about our investments in WPF are, first, in the tooling space, we're bringing all of the tools that we've made available to folks doing XAML for kind of the Windows, the more modern Windows, and bringing those tools into WPF as well, so you get timeline debugging, the live property editing, tree navigation, those kinds of things. And then Beth threw in on top of that some just general .NET, C# editor goodness, editor debugger goodness of being able to go and have a richer experience in the immediate window, as well as continuing to improve our edit and continue experiences. So that's a little bit about kind of building natively for Windows. WPF is still, the technology if you're building a managed app on native Windows. WPF is what I would still encourage you to go use to do that. Now let's start talking a little bit more about devices and going beyond just the Microsoft family devices, but also looking at other popular devices out there. And for a .NET developer, the approach we take there is really working with Xamarin. Xamarin's a great partner. They've gone and enabled a set of experiences where, as a C# developer, you can use C# and .NET to build applications that are going to run natively on Windows, iOS, and Android. And because you're doing it all with C# and .NET, you've got a higher ability, an increased ability to share code across those three different device platforms. So prior to this, if you wanted to build a native app on those platforms, you were going to have three code bases. You were going to have, a code base for iOS, one for Android, and one for Windows. Now with C# going across platform, you can share a significant amount of code between those and have access to the native APIs on the platform. So you can write C# code and call directly into iOS, Android, and Windows APIs. So you have 100% exposure to the API set, as well as the ability to create and share more code between those experiences. To give you a little look at that, let's start over here on my Windows laptop.
Watch out, Jay's coding.
Funny. Manager coding. Everybody out of the way. I did it to myself. So what I have here is a solution that's got a number of different application types and a number of different project types. We can just go ahead and increase that a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. But you see I've got some common code through portable libraries. I've even got the WPF application that Beth was just showing you. That's sitting in the same solution. I have universal applications for the Windows platform across Windows tablet and Windows Phone. But what we want to see here this time is my Android application built using Xamarin. So I'll go ahead and start this. And the first thing you'll notice is I did it really quickly, but up in that corner up there, you see VS Emulator, KitKat, whatever. So what this is launching is a new Visual Studio Android emulator. We decided that the Android emulators that are out there just didn't quite meet the needs of an application developer. So what we wanted to do was take the experience we had for building, phone emulators and mobile emulators for Windows and bring those over into, make them available for folks doing Android. So you're seeing, the Android OS is booting up. Down in the output window, we're loading all the assemblies and so forth. If I get over here and kind of unlock this, we should see the app load up here in a second. There it is. And so we have that My Shuttle app that Beth was showing you loaded up here in our Android emulator, created by Visual Studio. And this emulator is more targeted at application developer scenarios than the kind of scenarios you would find in the other Android emulators that were more about the device manufacturer and how you emulate the operating system on your device. So that's the code running in an Android emulator. Now let's switch over to my Mac, which likes to display itself really, really small. It must be kind of shy, I guess. But you see, same solution, right? It's that same Android project in there, as well as those Windows ones, as well as an iOS project here. And so in this case, what I can do, because I'm running on a Mac, I can connect to a build server, and I can go and run this in. We are connected to the build server.
She's really shy.
Let's reconnect to our build server. There we go. So now this is going to go and talk to a build server running natively on my Mac to compile the application, launch the iOS emulators here on my Mac, and launch that same emulation, same application now in an iOS emulator, so I can kind of see what my experience would be like. Now, of course, if I'd wanted to, I could have run all of these right on the Mac running Windows kind of in parallel. So I could have done iOS, Android, Windows all in that same environment if I'd wanted to. But I just thought it was fun to kind of show you from a Windows machine, you can do Android. You don't need to go after the Mac. So that's just a really quick look. There are a number of sessions this week that will dive into a lot more detail about how to go use C# to build these Android and iOS applications as well as Windows applications with Xamarin.
Cool.
So
that's pretty neat.
You guys are. They're going to make us beg for it. We're going to have to beg for it all
yeah,
all
it's
sessions.
okay.
That's all right.
It's all right. It's cool.
I can do that.
So there's another way to build apps, as I kind of alluded to when I was showing off the Android device up here. The driver app was actually built using Apache Cordova. And that technology is a hybrid app technology. If you're familiar with web development, you're web developers, any web developers out here? Okay, so building a Cordova app is familiar. Okay, you use HTML and JavaScript just like you do when you build web apps. But what's cool is the Cordova lets you use plugins to tap into native capabilities of the specific devices. So it's a breadth application, meaning you're writing one application, okay, one set of HTML and JavaScript. However, if you need to take advantage of some of the particular device capabilities, you go through plugins to do that. All right? So we've decided in Visual Studio, we created tools for Apache Cordova that change all the necessary tooling that you need to get things running. Okay? There's a lot of things that you need to download, install, configure. Ask my friend Nicole and those guys trying to get it all to work. Manually is very difficult. So the tools for Apache Cordova and Visual Studio kind of packages that all up together and gets you going and gets you really productive. And you can also use the Visual Studio emulator as well. So I'm going to go flip over to a Cordova project. Actually, this one. Okay, so let's get this stopped. Same machine I was on before here. All right, so here we go. First of all, let's just take a look at some of the structure of this project. So you notice that yes, we have a lot of HTML, we have JavaScript, we have TypeScript. TypeScript is great when you have fairly complex enterprise, style applications, and it helps you build JavaScript, very complex JavaScript apps. Okay, so we're using TypeScript in this particular project. All right, so you'll notice I've got the emulator here as well. Oh, one other thing I want to show here is the plugins. So you manage plugins through configuration. You can open up this config and take a look at some of the plugins that we have installed. So you'll see plugins for Azure Mobile Services and that kind of thing. So this is how you manage the plugins that take advantage of the devices. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and F5 this. Oops, wrong one. All right, did it work? Here we go. All right, there we go. New keyboard and new hands. All right, so my output window is on the side. How interesting. All right, that works. I think developers like to do it on the side. Okay, so you'll see that here the deployment is happening. There's also a lot of scripts that are task-based scripts that are running that we can do. Like, here we go, deploying now. Cross your fingers. It's installing. All right, it says it succeeded. Oh, here, it's sticking out, it's hanging out over here. All right. And here's the emulator. Running around. All right, well, there you go.
It's an emulated donut.
It's an emulating donut. It's emulating a donut. All right, well, you get the idea. So it's not just using the emulator for Xamarin apps. You can use the emulator for Cordova apps as well. And there are a ton of sessions, I know, going on this week around Apache Cordova development. So hopefully you check it out.
5. Okay, so we've talked about kind of the desktop and devices very, very quickly. Now let's talk a little bit about the cloud, right, and how the cloud plays in and the kinds of things we're seeing in that space. One of the big things, a key, a new buzzword to put on your buzzword bingo cards is microservices, right? The idea here, it's really it's a pattern for building large-scale cloud-based solutions. So those of you that have gray hair like I do, remember that we've had a number of different application patterns like this, right? We had client server, we had N-tier, I think we even called it Windows DNA at one point.
DNA was a long time ago.
See, I just aged myself. Thank you, a couple people, for nodding and saying you recognize that too.
I was 10.
And then we had service-oriented.
Maybe 12.
I could out you right now. But I won't. Yep. You were 10 and I was 24. So clearly I've aged better.
Ouch. Let's check out this map.
There's a script, and then there's what we're doing right now, which is nowhere near it. So let's talk about microservices. Microservices, it's got an evolution of the service-based pattern, the service-oriented design patterns, where really what people are trying to do with microservices is think about, as you scale these things out to incredibly complex types of solutions, the ability to go and do that while taking advantage of modern development practices like continuous integration and continuous delivery gets extremely difficult if you have one big monolithic service sitting back there, right? So the idea here is really thinking about a pattern in which you're identifying smaller, independent services that can be loosely coupled together to create a larger solution, allowing you to rev and version and increment each of those services individually. And then you do things like contracts and that kind of stuff to put in place to ensure you're not breaking other things. It allows you to think about testing differently, so you don't have to have a test bed that covers the whole thing. You think about what are the important threads to your solution that matter. If you think about an online kind of commerce site, some kind of shopping site, you would think about really stack ranking and looking at what's the most important thing that can never go down. That's what every service tests. So probably things like checkout are probably most important. But you know what? If the commentary on that product you're selecting didn't come back one time, you wouldn't want the whole site to go down, right? So you design for those kinds of things, and you design for failures. You design for that kind of stuff that is common in these types of solutions. That then allows us, as the application platform, to really go and create a set of services underneath that make it easy for you to scale and take advantage of a well-architected and well-designed solution. So we can start scaling things independently. We can do things in a manner that's much more flexible, kind of on your behalf, and allowing us to go and really optimize your compute experiences and your throughput and scale experiences. If you think about how microservices then has influenced what we're doing inside the Microsoft platform for developers, it's really about providing a great underlying infrastructure, right? And that's kind of in the slide, it's referred to as the app hosting infrastructure. Really, that is what the Azure Service Fabric that was talked about a couple weeks ago at Build. I know there's sessions again. I think actually Mark probably talked about it already today. It's really, that is the underlying infrastructure, the lowest level infrastructure for hosting and running and executing and managing these microservice-based solutions that scale infinitely. It's what we use inside of Microsoft to run services like Azure on SQL, where we can have 1.5-ish million databases, which actually are times 3 for each one of those, right? And keep that service up and running without the developers building that service worrying about it. We let the service fabric do it. But you don't always need to plug in at that level. So then we provide a higher level set of abstractions on top of that you can interact with. The hosting platform has some through actor frameworks and distributed dictionaries and those kinds of things. And then even further up, we look at a set of common services, platform level services that may be that are common, that you see people use all the time. So things like web applications, hosting a web application or a web API, backends for mobile applications, notification services. In that app service tier, right, that Azure App Service tier, we've also introduced other abstractions like the ability to orchestrate between these services through what we call logic apps, right? Just a simple, kind of easy, inspired by things like if this, then that kind of services, where it's just easy to string together a set of these services into one workflow, right? Passing data in between them, writing some logic that's going to go and work based on what you're doing and those kind of things. So that's kind of the inspiration, and that's how we think about those things. That's also the inspiration. This microservice pattern is also the inspiration for the .NET Core and ASP.NET 5 sitting on top of it. So with .NET 2015, we've introduced a new kind of profile ability within the framework to where we have what we call the .NET Core, really designed first and foremost for these kind of microservice-based architectures where you have smaller services, density in the hoster is important, throughput for the app is important, those kinds of things. We'll really think about and optimize the design for that, and then ASP.NET 5 layered in on top of that. .NET Core is also the stack that we announced back in November. We were taking open source and going to make available cross-platform. So we're going to have Microsoft-supported distributions of .NET Core and ASP.NET 5 for not only Windows, but Linux and the Mac operating system as well. Last week, we had the first kind of binary preview of those capabilities made available. It's as I said last week in my talk, it's a preview. So there's a steel thread that goes all the way through from, you can talk to SQL databases all the way through the web UI stack. And then there's differing levels of breadth depending on what you're doing and where you're interacting. So it's a preview. Don't think of it as the final surface area or the final state of the product. It's just a first kind of starting point that had something meaningful for us to share. Those projects are all open source. Back in February, we hit an interesting milestone for the project. That was the first time that on GitHub, you had this full .NET Core 5 stack available in GitHub. So the runtime, the base class libraries, the compilers, the Roslyn compilers, right, the C# and V.NET compilers that sit on top of those, right, to allow you to compile your applications, the ASP.NET Web Stack and the Entity Framework Stack were all, for the first time, together on GitHub. They're in different repos and different projects, but all available as open source.
It's the whole enchilada, people.
It's pretty cool. I will say that open source aspect is something that's really, it is another key theme we hear from, and when we talk to organizations about what things are they thinking about for their development in this fast-paced world, open source has to be a key part of your approach. I mean, that is where a lot of rapid innovation is happening. So we've gone into that from the .NET team's perspective and both putting our source open, but also using that as a way to kind of foster more conversations and interactions with an open source community and have more innovation around .NET. I can tell you that I've been very pleasantly surprised with the high level of interaction we've had in these projects and the significant amount of contributions that have come from the open source community into these projects. So yes, Microsoft developers are checking in code there, but we also have a lot of developers from outside the organization that are sending pull requests in with significant and meaningful work. It's a great place to engage. It's also a great place if there's things you've always wanted to make better about just your experience with .NET. Even things like documentation and those kinds of things, it's a great place to engage as a broader, community and improve our kind of experience there. I will say there's another set of things, of course, that we won't spend a lot of time today talking about. I believe tomorrow Habib from the team is doing kind of another level overview or deeper dive into what's new in .NET in 2015, and we'll talk more about these. But there's also a lot of things common across the Framework 4 Sticks release. That is the framework you think of today, the big one that has everything in it, and the .NET 5 Core release. Things around a new JIT compiler, SIMD library support, those kinds of things that are accrue to every developer, regardless of which framework model you're choosing. So with that, why don't we jump in and look a little bit at some of the things coming in ASP.NET?
You want to do the connected services?
If you want to.
Yeah, let's do it. So Jay was talking about microservices. Well, consumption of services is also really important too. And we wanted to make that a lot easier in Visual Studio as well. So let me turn to, I think it's this one. Okay, so this is the solution that Jay was showing you, Xamarin Apps. And this is where also that WPF app is housed. We also have these Windows apps. Okay, so I'm going to wait for it to load. Here we go.
Yeah, I guess while it's loading,
Yeah.
I'll go back and recover from my botched segue.
It's okay.
So when we say cloud, there are two aspects of cloud that we do think about, right? And I talked a lot about the idea of using the cloud as a target to deploy your applications into. What Beth's going to go into now is a little bit of also the idea of building applications, device applications, desktop applications, web applications that are consuming services from the cloud, right? Whether they be SaaS-based solutions that your organization has acquired, or core services from like a compute tier, like storage and those kinds of things. And so that's kind of what we're going to go into a little bit now, like thinking about how do we take advantage of the cloud for bringing more resources into our application.
Yeah, I mean, and every service is different. There's different requirements for how you authorize the service, how you talk with the service, how you configure the services. So they're all different. You know, the world of simple SOAP and WSDL is pretty much gone. So here's a new...
Because SOAP and WSDL was simple.
It was simple. It was simple. Yeah. It's not simple anymore, right? Especially when you're trying to use the new services, you just want to take advantage of some of the, you know, some like email or something inside of a service. Like, you know, for instance, we have these first-party services from Microsoft that we're showing here in this Add Connected service, okay? And it's more of a guided experience, you'll see. It's not just Add Service Reference anymore. We'll also have third-party as well, plugging into this connected services. All right, so Salesforce here is offering their service through this dialogue as well. And I believe there absolutely is a session on with Salesforce later in the week. Well, what I want to do in this particular application, this is a store app. I'm going to use it as kind of a dashboard as well. But I want to be able to look at invoices on my OneDrive, okay, on my company OneDrive. So in order to do that, we're going to use the Office 365 APIs. A lot of sessions on that as well this week. So we'll sign in. And if the internet is good to me, we will have a good time here.
Sure. Failures aren't your fault. It's always the internet.
It's always the internet now. You have to use, everything is on the internet. You can't even do a session anymore without the internet.
But I thought you were 10 back when that...
Yeah. Well, when Al Gore invented the internet, yeah. Okay. I remember that. Okay, so I just signed in, all right? So now it's asking me, like, okay, what kind of services do I want to consume? So you'll notice it's providing calendar, contacts, mail, my files, sites, and users and groups. So I can get to all of this data, and I can use it inside of my custom app. You know, you could even use it in your WinForms apps, if you have WinForms apps, all right? So this is just, I'm using it in a store app, happen to be. I am going to select my files, and then what we do is we configure what types of permissions I need to ask the user. Okay, so this is like the user will grant access to these things. Okay, so this is what the app is requesting. I'm just going to read the files in this case, so just a simple thing. All right, so I've already done this. What it does do is it adds some references, okay, so particularly these two, because I'm going to be reading some files inside of SharePoint, right? All right, so it also gives you sort of a wizard, I don't know, experience, okay? After those things are added to my project, what ends up happening is just like a guided walkthrough of like, okay, well, here's how you work with these services, all right? I'm going to show you a couple different ways, a couple different samples, and kind of, you know, it's up to you how you're going to want to chew up the data inside of your app. So let's go ahead and run this, so you kind of see what the experience is like. All right, so I've got my rides. I'm going to click on this ride that we entered earlier, and you'll see there's this invoice button down here. And what it's doing is it's asking, okay, I need to connect to your OneDrive, so please log in. All righty. And now it's going to ask, I need to ask permission, can I please read your files? And the user says, yes, I'll let you do that. In this case, I'm just iterating through a list of files on my OneDrive. It's just going to pop up in a message box, okay? But we could take and we could, you know, open the file, work with the files, save them back, that kind of thing. All right, so that's sort of just a quick run-through of like a connected service experience specific to Office 365. All right? Thank you. All right, so now let's talk about ASP.NET 5. Okay, so, all right. Let me shut some things down here. All right. So as Jay was mentioning, ASP.NET 5 is built cross-platform with the .NET Core, okay? And the cool thing, I think one of the coolest things, is that it's very modular packages that you're pulling into your applications now through NuGet. You're only basically using things, the DLLs, the assemblies that you need. You're not necessarily needing the whole entire .NET framework, okay? So you could technically write an application and deploy it to a machine that does not have the .NET framework, because everything is also self-contained. So not only is it modular, it's side by side. Okay, so when you do make changes, maybe the .NET framework is on the machine, and some update comes along, it won't trump on top of your apps that are running. Or somebody deploys a fix to the .NET framework, your web app is not affected at all. Okay, so you can actually even be running different versions of the CLR. Okay, all right. So to kind of, whoa, it's kind of just opening things. All right. Wow, this guy really loves me. He just wants to keep opening. Let's go back to our ASP.NET. Very funny. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice, this is my ASP.NET application. This is actually a customer-facing website as well as the services, the web API services here. All right, you'll notice, probably the first thing you'll notice as an ASP.NET developer is we kind of have a different structure, okay? I think I'm not a traditional web developer at all. Actually, I was more of like a rich client developer. I think that this structure makes a lot more sense to me. www.root, these are the files that are deployed. Files that are deployed are here. There's not like some magic scattered of files everywhere, and Visual Studio is not doing like magic anymore. This is like literally what goes on disk, okay? So I like that. The other thing I like is we have dependencies. We have dependencies on Bower and NPM in this case, right? So that we can use Bower to pull in our favorite JavaScript frameworks that we're using, like jQuery or Bootstrap or Angular or whatever it is, and NPM to do like tasks, to build tasks, post-build tasks, pre-build tasks, that kind of thing, and to pull in all kinds of tools from Node. All right, so the other cool thing is the references. So if you take a look at DNX is the .NET execution environment, DNX core. You'll notice that these are all NuGet packages, like I mentioned before. Okay? These are all modular. They're all coming down from NuGet. And the way you manage them is all through a JSON file now. So we go up to this project.json, and I'm going to stick this back into view. We actually manage the versions and exactly what we want to pull down from NuGet right in here. So if I say, all right, we actually don't really need authorization, I'm just, this app, we don't need it, I'm going to just remove it. I'm going to press save, and you'll notice that we're restoring the packages automatically. Okay, so now it's removing the package. So what's really cool is when the project JSON goes with the files, you can give it to another developer, and it will automatically restore the packages from NuGet. So you never have to check these things in. You don't have to manage them yourself. These references like you would have to before. It just happens. You have to have an internet connection, and you're good to go. Okay? It's really convenient. Yeah, I love that. It's super simple to manage, too. So that's awesome. All right, so let's do a couple things. Let's start this baby up. I'm going to browse this with Google Chrome and Internet Explorer. So I'm going to hit those guys up. I'm going to move this guy over here to the side. Whoop. Let's unpin that just so we can see. All right, cool. All right, so you see we've got Internet Explorer, we've got Chrome. I'm going to, we actually had this before. Oh, this is neat. I had this before. In Visual Studio 2013, we have browser link, right? This is... Okay, cool. All right, that's cool. I'm editing the view in this case, but wouldn't it be great if I could also edit the code? Okay? I want to make changes to the code. All right, I don't want to have to rebuild. I'm not building right now. I'm not in debug mode or anything like that, right? I'm just playing with the shape of my app and what it looks like right now. But what I really want to do is I want to change this message, okay? But this message is in code, right? So let me go to the definition here and find the reference. All right. Here it is. Okay, I actually want to change the C# code, line of C# code. So let's just do that, actually. Wouldn't it be cool if we could just do this? All right, except that I spelled it wrong. All right, and I'm just going to press save, no build whatsoever. And actually, I'm just going to go right over here, click refresh, click refresh. There you go. I could have done that in Notepad. All right, so we're using Roslyn under the hood to do dynamic compilation. All right, it's detecting the file change. It's dynamically compiling. I mean, we could actually kind of prove it by going back to my Solution Explorer here, and let's just take a look at the project this way. All right, bin folder, nothing in it. That's why it's dynamic. All right, cool. One thing in it.
Still nothing in it.
All right, still nothing in it. Sorry, wrong bin. It's just the ASP.NET Loader. All right, so that's we're not writing files to disk anymore. You don't have to go through that F5 cycle, restart up the app. All right, so basically it's true dynamic development. It's not just your views. It's not just your CSS. It's your full source code as well. Cool?
Cool.
Very cool.
That was a clap that wanted to start.
Well, they gave you a clap, and you were asking for more, but that's cool. We'll take it.
It's kind of like I have to admit, and I can't believe this still happens, but in Seattle, when you go to the Mariners games, I think they think it's still the 1980s because everybody tries to do the wave, right? I think that. Anyway,
Don't knock on the
you
wave.
see that happen all the time. Like the little wave will start with like 2 people, and it's like a little fledgling wave.
Let's do the wave, guys. We'll start over here.
Anyway, but
Look, we almost have
we're not here to talk about baseball and waves. What?
We'll talk about that later.
So we did those changes to ASP.NET and to create a more dynamic environment because we felt that was something that developers wanted, was to be a lot more iterative in that kind of experience, be more dynamic. But we also did it because we wanted them to create an experience where you didn't have to just be a Visual Studio developer on Windows to build an ASP.NET based application. Prior to ASP.NET 5, if you tried to build an ASP.NET application outside of Visual Studio, you were just crazy. Because, crazy solution files and build tasks and all kinds of nutty stuff was going on. What we want to do is just open that up and make it just a lot more approachable for people in the kinds of tools they use for web development today. So we switched back to my Mac. And one of the things that, we can use a bunch of different text editors, your favorite editor, VI, Sublime, whatever you want to use to go create it. But last week we released this new member of the Visual Studio family that we call Visual Studio Code, which is a cross-platform kind of code-centric editing experience that can run on Windows, Mac, Linux, and so forth. So what I have in here by default is it just opened my last project. Turns out this is that my shuttle web solution that we were just looking at. If I wanted to go in and kind of look at something different, if we just go in and say File, Open, I apologize, it's kind of small. All I need to do is I spun up just a simple, hello world ASP.NET app using Yeoman last night. And I'll just point it to that directory, say open, and now Visual Studio Code is going to go and just look at the directory and start loading in all of the artifacts that make up this project. It doesn't have to know about solutions and project files and all those kinds of things that Visual Studio used to worry about. If I want to go and work with and change the packages and things that we're working with, I can do that right from within here. You'll see that if it catches up, which it didn't, we would get statement completion and all the, it's because it's not valid. Let's try it one more time. Put a comma, go in here and start. There we go.
Cool.
Right? So we're getting, statement completion, IntelliSense, those kinds of things that you would expect from a code-aware, a code-centric editing experience. Now, of course, editing is one thing, but we want to be able to run it as well. So one of the things that Visual Studio Code has is the ability to integrate a set of commands that it can run. So when I just go in here and bring up the command, and let's say I want to just fire up the Kestrel web server, or Kestrel host, which can run on the Mac. So this is just a simple host that can support running ASP.NET applications or .NET Core applications. We'll switch over to Safari. Not really, we'll switch over to it. Where are you? And we'll just go to localhost. And there you see an ASP.NET 5 application running on my Mac, running locally on my Mac. Wow.
Wow. The world is ending, people.
But wait.
There's more?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there is.
Show me.
So Beth showed you how we can make an edit, right, to a file, to code, and it just kind of gets picked up. So if I was to go over here, and let's switch back over to, to code, and we'll go into the views, and we'll go into the home. Actually, we'll go into the controllers. I think that's where the code got put, right? Go to the home controller, and let's go just edit this, right? And say, hello, Ignite, right? Go up. We'll save that. Come back over. What did I change? The About page or the Contact page?
Yeah.
And it didn't do anything. Now, why didn't it do anything? Well, it didn't do anything because it turns out there's a little bug in the version of the runtime that I'm working with right now. So I had to turn off the file watcher. So now let's go just restart that. And if we click around over here now, you're going to see a delay because it is, again, dynamically compiling it again. And this time, it picked up the change.
Cool.
So it will. Again, just trying to create that seamless, productive, iterative experience, regardless of what platform you're working on. The fact that these things are all now just, everything about your project is just files on disk, files in a folder, makes it really easy for us to go and collaborate with multiple developers on a project, regardless of what platform, operating system, or tools we're trying to use. That was really the goal here. That's the motivation, is to enable you to use the tools you want to use in the way you want to use them. Of course, Visual Studio Code can also do debugging. Can't do it on top of .NET Core 5 right now, so I can't show it to you, but in the future, it will be able to. We'll be able to set a breakpoint in this same experience on my Mac, hit it, and get all of the rich kind of debugging information that you'd be used to. Of course, we can also go and incorporate into the rest of our tool chain, so we can interact with Git repositories and so forth to go and push these things in, interact with our continuous integration, continuous delivery flow, and so forth. So I think that's what we wanted to show there, right?
Yeah. We have 15 minutes left.
Yeah, so let's talk about, so we've talked a lot about the things we're doing to enable you to build more modern applications and the kinds of modern applications you need to around devices and cloud and how the cloud plays a role. But there's another aspect of the cloud that we think is really interesting and how it's modernizing and changing the way we work as developers. And specifically, it's inspired this thing that we think about and talk about as dev test in the cloud. So regardless of what kind of application you're building, where you're deploying it, thinking about how do I go meet some of those, how do I address some of the challenges I might have today inside of my organization with creating development and test environments, and take advantage of the cloud as a resource for doing that. So if we think about it today, you're probably in one of two types of organizations. You're either an organization that's we have an IT department that's really providing you a lot of support for all of your development hardware and operating system needs. Right? And sometimes that support takes a couple days to spin up a virtual machine. Sometimes it takes a couple weeks. Sometimes I've heard stories of 6 months to acquire a VM. Not a physical hardware, just a VM. And so that's, there's a lot of value being provided to us there, but boy, it'd be nice to go faster. The other types of organizations that you see, we see this at Microsoft a lot, where if I walk through the halls and look at our engineers and peek into our engineers' offices, I can tell just by looking in their office and their workspace, I can give you a pretty good guess at how long they've been at the company. The folks that have been at the company for 15 plus years have a mountain of machines, right? I think every PC they ever got since they were an employee is sitting in their office, right? These crazy cables coming out all over the place, right? Because, man, I might need a hardware at some point to try something out, so let me just hoard it all over here in the corner, right? Now, the people that have been at the company for less than 5 years, I go to their workspace, see a few monitors, maybe see one PC hanging under their desk, because they do it all in the cloud. They spin up all their environments in the cloud, whether it be a private cloud or the public cloud of Azure. So when we talk about using the cloud for dev tests, that's kind of what we're trying to go after. We're trying to create the ability for first developers to just get the resources you need more quickly, whether it's for your dev environment or whether it's for various test environments, as well as have them around in different stages, in different states, so that you can quickly spin them up. If you're supporting 7 versions of an application, right, across 4 different operating system releases, those kinds of things, being able to have all those configurations readily at your hand, and just spin them up and tear them down as you need them. even if the application you're building is going to be deployed back on premise, right? Think about how do we use the cloud for those kinds of scenarios and benefits. So we set out to go create an experience like this. We created one internally. We had a private cloud that we've been running for a while that allows our developers to do this. And we're like, how do we go make this something that every developer can use? So that's what we wanted to do. Unfortunately, we haven't done it yet. But so let me give you a demo of what we're thinking about. The idea here is to you could go use Azure today and you could create IaaS VMs, right, just on your own, start them out of the marketplace images and those kinds of things. And then you have lab experiences, right, which are the big, all-encompassing lab kind of environments. But we felt there was something that we needed kind of in between those two things to bridge that gap. So the idea here is that what we would have is a lab kind of service environment inside of Azure that allowed you to go create a set of virtual machines, definitions, like here's what we want, right? Here's the kinds of images we want. Do some fun, productivity things like, hey, I need 10 of these. I want 10 of these available and spun up at 9 o'clock in the morning every day so that when developers come in, right, they might be able to go into a pre-started image and just say, let me claim that one and use it as mine today, right? So rather than, hours to install the, last night's software, you just go claim it immediately, connect to it and do your development over kind of a remote desktop environment. When we have experiences for administrators or people that own the lab environment to go create virtual machines and define them, whether that's using specific images, but more importantly, defining how do you get your code, right, into that environment. So thinking about these artifacts. If you were at Brian's session, he showed you how, release management and build can go and deploy things into your environment. We're using the same concept here, the same technology to allow you to also specify a set of packages, apps, whatever they be, that you want to be part of that image when it's created. So that's kind of what this is trying to show. And of course, the last thing is the ability to look at and manage this environment, right? So doing things like allowing you to specify, hey, certain times of day where if the machine is idle, let's say, after 5 o'clock on Friday, if we detect that that machine is idle for over an hour, just go ahead and persist it and shut it down so we don't get charged for it anymore, right? We could put, sort of, we call them quotas right now. It's probably the wrong term because it sounds more like big governance from the top than we mean. It's really more like, let me say, here's how much I think I'm going to use of this thing, and let me just see, am I staying within that trajectory of what I assumed I was going to use? Help me just understand my usage a little bit better so that I can, manage my dollars better and those kinds of things. So giving you some predictability like that, allowing you to apply rules, access rules, those kinds of things are some of the things we're thinking about as part of kind of creating this sort of experience in this environment. So you guys think that's something interesting? Good, because if you're interested, you can go out to Azure, to the Azure website, azure.microsoft.com. If you go into the feature area and look at compute, and look at virtual machines, and if you look right down here, you see this little thing that says coming soon, right? Organize your VMs and click here to learn more. So everybody, click here to learn more. And when you learn more, you can go and request an invite. So when the service is available in a private preview, probably towards the end of the month in a few weeks, we will contact you back and say, hey, we've got this available. You want to come try it out and start giving us additional feedback. So if you're interested in something like this, I highly encourage you to go explore it. The intent here is this is just a capability of Azure that we're really creating, right? So it's not like some thing on top of it that we're going to start charging you for or something like that. It's just a way to make you more easily be able to manage and take advantage of the Azure resources and Azure compute that you may already have. So as an MSDN subscriber, you already have Azure credits, right? You can apply those into this kind of experience as well. So I encourage you, if you're interested, kind of hit that website, click the request. The more of you that do it, the closer I will be to winning the bet with the team as to how many people are going to do it.
Everybody do it now!
I am not
Crash
opposed
site.
to stacking the deck in my favor.
You heard it first, people. That's pretty cool, Jared.
So that's the idea behind this. We think it's kind of an interesting thing to go do, an interesting way to use the cloud. I'm going to assume you did too because you clapped a little bit there at one point. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested, go sign up for the invite, request an invite. So with that, kind of want to just sort of wrap it up a little bit. And, the intent here was to give you kind of that quick, fire hose style view of tour through what kinds of things we're focused on, why we're focused on them. I thought it was important to share a little bit of why we wanted to do these things. Hopefully it'll help you think about and predict what direction we may go a little bit in the future. But also just give you an idea of what kinds of things you might want to go spend some time the rest of this week and dive a little deeper into, taking advantage of the various sessions that are available. So everything we talked about has probably at least 2 sessions on them, probably even more.
We're actually also in the expo hall. We've got developer tools experts all in there.
That's true. If you haven't gotten enough of us already, we'll be down there. We'll be down there tonight, I'm sure, so you can badger us over the reception.
Ask us great questions.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. Did I say something different? Anyway, with that, I really do thank you all for spending some time with us. Please don't forget to do the evaluations. Just remember, the numbers are for my boss, which in Beth's case is me.
Yeah, please.
The verbatims are for us, which is great. So you have been amazing. I know Beth and I are going to give you guys the top score in our evaluations.
Absolutely. You guys were awesome.
So with that, we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a good conference.